Now, when my days are coming to an end, and strength has finally left my old body, I often return in thoughts to that day in Keadas, to the abyss that was to become my grave, but became the place of my spiritual birth. I lived a long life after that day. I fought many enemies, knew victories and defeats, lost friends and found new allies. But I consider my greatest victory not some battle, but that moment when I emerged from the underground cave into sunlight. The fox taught me the most important thing. There's always a way out, even from the most hopeless situations. You just need not to lose hope, and keep searching. Not give up when everything seems lost. Look for unconventional solutions where conventional ones don't work. Messenia never became completely free during my lifetime. The Spartans proved stronger, at least in this war, but they couldn't break our spirit, couldn't make us submissive slaves, and this means the struggle isn't finished. Someday, perhaps in many years, perhaps in centuries, someone from our descendants will complete what we started, and in that distant victory will be a particle of the miracle that happened to me in the abyss of Keadas, a particle of wisdom from a small red-tailed fox who showed that even from the deepest abyss, there's a path to light. When my time comes, I'll go to my ancestors with clear conscience. I did everything I could for my people's freedom. I taught young warriors not only to fight but also to think. I showed them that true strength isn't in muscles and weapons, but in mind and will. And now, when the last rays of setting sun illuminate my gray head, I thank all the gods of Olympus for that long and difficult but beautiful life they gave me. And especially I thank the unknown deity who sent me that small red fox in the darkest hour of my life. Messenia will be free. Someday. I believe this with all my heart. And when it happens, someone will surely remember old warrior Aristomenes, who learned wisdom from a fox and passed this wisdom to his descendants. Long live free Messenia. May our children remember the price of freedom, and may they never forget the fox's lesson. There's always a way out. You just need to look for it. If you enjoy this content, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really means a lot to me and helps me keep writing new stories for you. Thank you for your support. My name is Aristomenes, son of Nicomedes, grandson of Aristocles the Brave. I was born in free Messenia, when our fields knew not the Spartan yoke, when our children played beneath the olive trees, without fear of red-cloaked raiders. My father was one of the leaders of the Messenian army, my mother the daughter of a priest of Zeus from Mythome. The gods gave me strength of arm and purity of heart, but the greatest gift was love for my native land. When the Spartans first came to our borders, claiming our lands as theirs, I was 20 years old. I already understood that there could be no peace between free Messenia and slave Sparta. Either we would remain free people, or we would become helot slaves who work foreign fields under the master's whip. The first war lasted long. My father died at the Steniklaros ford, covering the retreat of our people. I held him in my arms as he died, and he whispered to me, "Son, don't let them turn us into slaves. Better death than dishonor." After the first war, we had 20 years of relative peace. The Spartans prepared, gathered strength, while we lived ordinary lives, raised children, worked the land. Some even believed the Spartans would leave us in peace, but I knew they would return. A slave master cannot sleep peacefully while free people live nearby. And they did return. The Second Messenian War began when I was 40 years old. By then I had become one of the leaders whom people listened to and trusted. They called me the best of the Greeks, not because I was the strongest, but because I always fought for justice. The morning of the day I was captured began like any other. I woke in my tent on Mount Gera, where we had established our main fortress. The first thing I heard was the voices of sentries changing shifts, then the distant noise of the camp awakening, the clatter of weapons, conversations of warriors, the neighing of horses. I stepped out of my tent and watched the sunrise over the Keadas mountains. Red light illuminated our camp, reflected off bronze spear points, off shields hung beside tents, How many such dawns had I seen? How many times had I thought this might be the last? Pancratus approached. My oldest centurion, a man I had known since childhood. He had served under my father's command, and after his death had come to serve me, reliable as stone, wise as a serpent, brave as a lion. Aristomenes, he said, approaching and bowing. A helot has come from the Spartan camp, says he has important intelligence about enemy plans. I grew alert. Recently, more and more defectors had been coming to us from the Spartan camp. Some were genuine escapees who couldn't endure the harshness of the Spartan regime, but among them were also spies, sent by Spartan command to gather information or even commit sabotage. Where is he? By the main guard post. They say he's wounded. Looks exhausted. We went together to the guard post. By the fire sat a man of about 35, thin and wiry like most helots who performed hard physical labor. The most notable feature of his face was a long scar running from his left temple to his chin. His clothes were torn and dirty. His left leg bandaged with a piece of cloth stained with blood. When he saw me, he quickly rose and fell to his knees. Lord Aristomenes, I am Damocles from Andania. I served Master Cleombrotus. I escaped 2 nights ago when I learned of their plans. Tell me, I said, studying his face carefully. They're preparing a great assault on Gira, my lord. Tomorrow at dawn, simultaneously from 3 sides, south, west, and north, and from the 4th side, the east. They'll set an ambush for those who try to flee. The plan sounded entirely realistic. The Spartans indeed could attempt such a maneuver. They had enough men to attack simultaneously from several directions, and an ambush for those retreating that was typical Spartan tactics. How do you know these plans? I asked. My master Cleombrotus is one of the siege commanders. Yesterday evening he held a council with other officers. I served them at table and heard their entire conversation. And why did you decide to tell us this? After all, you're risking your life. Damocles raised his eyes to me, and I saw something like fanaticism in them. Because I am Messenian, my lord. I was captured as a child when the Spartans burned my native village. All these years I've waited for a chance to take revenge on them. The story sounded convincing, but something troubled me. Perhaps he had come too conveniently, or told too much detail about Spartan plans. I called a war council. All the centurions and experienced warriors came. We debated long what to do. Some believed we should prepare for defense. Others proposed striking first, attacking the Spartans while they weren't expecting it. And I thought about this, Damocles. Something about him wasn't right, but I couldn't understand what exactly. Friends, I said finally. We'll do both. Part will remain to defend Gira, and I'll lead a small force and try to strike their camp from an unexpected direction. The plan was this. I would lead 50 of our best warriors by a roundabout route, circle the Spartan camp, and attack from behind just when they would be attacking our fortress. This would force them to abandon their assault and turn part of their forces to defend their own camp. I chose the men personally. I knew each by name, knew his family, knew how he fought. Among them was Androcles, my best friend. He approached me as I was arming myself. Aristomenes, he said quietly. I have a bad feeling about this operation. What feeling, old warrior? I smiled. How many times have we gone on such missions? That's exactly why I'm saying this. Everything's too simple with this helot. He came too conveniently. I put my hand on his shoulder. Perhaps you're right, but if we suspect every defector, soon we'll stop trusting each other, and without trust, there's no victory. Androcles shook his head. Trust is a wonderful thing, but remember, a warrior must be not only a lion, but also a fox. These words would prove prophetic. We left the fortress at sunset through a secret passage on the western slope of the mountain. This passage was known only to a few people, a narrow path hidden among rocks and bushes that led from the fortress directly into the forest. Bypassing Spartan posts, we moved in single file. maintaining complete silence. I led the column. Damocles was beside me. Androcles brought up the rear. Everyone knew their role in the coming battle. The plan was simple. Approach the central Spartan camp from an unexpected side. Strike quickly at the command post. Create maximum confusion, and retreat before the enemy could organize pursuit. On the way, Damocles told us about the layout of the Spartan camp. Everything sounded logical and detailed. He knew where the commander's tents stood, where weapons were stored, where horses were kept, where guard posts were positioned. "See that rock?" he said, pointing to a dark silhouette ahead. "Behind it begins the valley where the main camp stands. From there to the commander's tents is no more than 200 paces." When we reached the forest, we made a short stop. The warriors rested briefly, checked their weapons, drank a sip of water. I called the commanders and explained the plan once more. "From here we go, with only 10 of the quietest men. We'll scout the situation, then signal the others. Remember, our task is not to destroy the entire camp, but to create maximum confusion just when they begin their attack on Gira." I chose 10 of the most experienced fighters. Damocles again asked to go with us, and I agreed once more. We moved through the forest almost until midnight. The moon lit the path. Trees cast fantastic shadows. Somewhere far in the forest an owl cried a bad omen, as the old warriors say. But I didn't believe in omens. When we emerged into the clearing near the Spartan camp, I saw that Damocles hadn't lied about the location. The camp was exactly where he said. Tents arranged in perfect order. As always with Spartans, sentries walked their established routes. Horses were tied near the central tents. "See, Aristomenes?" Damocles whispered. "There, by the large red tent, stand the commander's horses. And here, to the right, the weapons and supplies depot." I nodded and signaled the squad to prepare. According to plan, we were to wait until dawn, when the Spartans would begin their attack on Gira, then assault the camp. And then happened what changed everything. One of my men, young Nicias, suddenly fell. I turned and saw a dagger protruding from his back, and nearby stood Damocles, with a huge stone in his hand. "Betrayal!" I managed to shout before that stone struck my head. Then Spartans leaped from the bushes around us. They surrounded us from all sides like hunters surround prey. We had fallen into a perfectly prepared trap. My men tried to fight, but there was no chance. We were only 10, and they were 50 or more. Besides, they caught us by surprise when we were focused on observing the camp. The fight was brief. Androcles died among the first. A Spartan spear pierced his chest clean through. Falling, he stretched his hand toward me and his lips moved as if he wanted to say something. But I didn't hear his voice. The others also died quickly. Phanes tried to break through to the forest, but a Spartan javelin stopped him at the very edge of the clearing. Aristomenes fought 2 warriors simultaneously, but a third struck him from behind. Only I was taken alive. Obviously, the Spartans had special plans for me. When I came to, my hands were firmly bound behind my back, and my head ached as if it were being split with hammers. Damocles stood nearby talking with a Spartan officer, a tall, thin man with a red beard. "Yes, Lord Cleander, this is he. Aristomenes the Fearless. Now Messenian resistance will be broken." Cleander looked at me with the curiosity of a predator examining prey. "So this is that same Aristomenes who gave us so much trouble. He doesn't look so terrible." "Don't judge by appearance, sir," Damocles replied. "This man is worth an entire army. As long as he lives, the Messenians won't surrender." Now I understood the full villainy of the plan. Damocles had never been an escaped helot. He was a Spartan agent, specially sent to us. His task was to lure me from the impregnable fortress and lead me into an ambush. And he had accomplished this task brilliantly. They raised me to my feet and began binding me even more tightly. My head spun from the blow. There was a taste of blood in my mouth. But the worst thing was different, the realization of my own stupidity. How could I have fallen for such a primitive trap? How could I not have listened to Androcles' warning? "What shall we do with him?" asked one of the Spartan warriors. Cleander smiled maliciously. "Take him to Keadas. Let him die slowly, as befits Sparta's fiercest enemy. Keadas. Even the name of this place inspired terror. I had heard terrible stories about it, but thought they were just legends, tales meant to frighten Sparta's enemies. Now I would have to find out if these stories were true. The next morning they raised me and began preparing for the journey. The Spartans calmly ate breakfast, drank watered wine, joked among themselves. I sat bound by a tree watching them, feeling my stomach painfully contract from hunger and thirst. 2 warriors were assigned to escort me. The elder was called Eurytus, a man of about 40, short, solidly built, with small, evil eyes and bad teeth. It was obvious he hated me personally. Perhaps I had killed someone close to him in previous battles. The younger one, Lysander, was completely different. About 25 years old, tall and handsome with regular features. In his eyes I saw something like pity. Later I learned he wasn't Spartan by birth, but an Arcadian serving in the Spartan army as a mercenary. Why these 2 specifically? Lysander asked Cleander. Because this one is cunning as a snake, the commander replied. He might try to escape or bribe the escort, but together you'll control each other. They untied my legs but left my hands firmly bound. Eurytus kicked me in the back. Move, you dog. We don't have all day. The path to Keadas lay through mountain trails across the Keadas ridge. The sun blazed mercilessly. Helios seemed to have deliberately stopped his chariot above us. Sweat flooded my eyes. Salt stung the wounds on my head. Each step came with effort. Worst was the thirst. My throat was so dry it felt like I was swallowing heated sand. My lips cracked and bled. My tongue swelled and moved heavily in my mouth. Every half hour I asked to stop for rest, but Eurytus only laughed. Tired, Messenian hero? Where's your legendary endurance? Lysander several times tried to give me water. I saw that this cruelty was unpleasant to him, but Eurytus always forbade it. Don't give roosters water before death. Let him suffer like our boys he killed suffered. On the way, the escorts talked among themselves, and I heard every word. Lysander didn't understand why they were dragging me so far. Could have finished him in camp and been done with it, such as, he don't deserve an easy death, Eurytus replied. How many of our boys died from his sword? Let him die slowly, in torment, as befits an enemy of Sparta. What if he tries to escape? From Keadas, no one escapes. That chasm is a prison in itself. Whoever falls in doesn't come out. Listening to this conversation, I tried to understand if I had even the slightest chance of salvation. My hands were bound tightly. There were 2 escorts, both armed. Around us were mountains where it was easy to get lost, even if I managed to escape. Where to go? Tugira was far, and Spartan patrols could be everywhere. But the main thing, I couldn't abandon my people. Even if I saved myself, what would I tell them? That I fled while they fought and died? No. Better death than shame. We reached Keadas in the evening when the sun was already declining toward the horizon. From afar I saw a black spot among the rocks, an opening in the earth that looked like a wound in the body of the world. Even at a distance of several hundred paces, this place inspired horror. Around the chasm there were no signs of life, no trees, no bushes, no grass, only bare stone and dead silence. Even birds didn't fly over this place. Here we've come to your final dwelling, hero, Eurytus said with malicious satisfaction. Now you'll see what awaits enemies of Sparta. Lysander was silent, but I saw he didn't like what was happening. Deep in his soul he apparently preserved humanity, not yet destroyed by Spartan upbringing. When we approached right to the edge of the chasm, I understood how terrible this place was. Keadas was an enormous hole in the earth, so deep that the bottom was lost in darkness. The walls were almost vertical, smooth, worked by water and winds of millennia. Pebbles from under our feet scattered into the abyss and disappeared in darkness. Not reaching the bottom, from the chasm came coldness, and some unnatural smell, perhaps the smell of death. Eurytus pushed me to the very edge of the chasm. I stood on the boundary between life and death, feeling beneath my feet crumbling rock that could collapse from any careless movement. Look well, Messenian dog, he said. This is your final dwelling. Here you'll unite with your ancestors. I straightened and looked him in the eyes. You think I fear death? I've seen it many times on the battlefield. It's no more terrible than life in slavery. We'll see about that, he replied maliciously. Lysander, help me throw this carrion down. The younger Spartan reluctantly approached. I saw doubt in his eyes, but he didn't dare disobey his senior. Wait, I said. Let me speak final words. What words? Eurytus snorted. Want to pray to your gods? They won't help you anymore. I want to send words to my enemies, I replied as calmly as possible. Words you'll convey to your commanders. The escorts exchanged glances. Curiosity overcame haste. Speak quickly, Eurytus allowed. I looked at the red sun setting behind the mountains. Tell your masters, Messenia will not become Sparta's slave while even one free Messenian lives. My death won't stop resistance. On the contrary, it will only inflame it. Eurytus laughed. Big words for a dead man. Lysander, end this comedy. I managed one more look at the world. At the red sun, setting behind blue mountains. At sparse clouds in the sky. I thought of Messenia, which I might never see again. Of my wife and children. Of the warriors left on Gira. For Messenia, I cried and felt a push in my back. The last thing I heard, falling into darkness. Fly to Hades. I don't know how long I was unconscious. Perhaps several hours. Perhaps a whole day. When I came to, above my head shone a tiny circle of sky distant as a star. The first thing I felt was unbearable pain in my right arm. It was broken in several places and hung shapeless along my body. My head also ached. Blood had dried on my face. But I was alive. By miracle, but alive. I tried to sit up and groaned from pain. Every movement echoed with agony in my broken arm. But I needed to understand where I was, and if there was even the slightest chance of rescue. I looked around as much as possible in the half-darkness. I lay at the bottom of a deep stone well. The walls were almost vertical, smooth, worked by water and winds over millennia. The height was so dizzying it was hard to believe I had survived such a fall. The diameter of this natural well was approximately 15 to 20 paces. The bottom was covered with stones of various sizes, dried branches that had fallen from above long ago, and bones. Human bones. The bones lay in different parts of the chasm, partially covered by stones, partially scattered by wind. One skull lay quite close, and its empty eye sockets looked at me with mute reproach. Who was this? What Messenian hero? Or simple peasant who refused to submit to the Spartan yoke? How long had he lived here at the bottom of this chasm? Did he beg the gods for salvation? Did he proudly accept his fate? Forgive me, unknown friend, I whispered. I don't know your name, but I know you were brave. Otherwise they wouldn't have thrown you here. Among the bones lay fragments of weapons, bent remains of swords, spear points, pieces of shields. Perhaps even commanders. Like me, I crawled away from this terrible place, as far as possible. But even at the opposite end of the chasm, I couldn't get rid of the feeling that those dead eyes were watching me. Soon my body will join yours, I thought. My bones will lie beside yours, and in years someone will throw someone else here, and he'll see my skull. What frightened me was the ingloriousness of such death, to fade slowly in a stone pit, like a bug in a jar. The worst torment was thirst. My lips cracked and bled. My tongue swelled and moved heavily in my mouth. My throat burned as if I had swallowed red-hot coals. I tried licking stones, hoping to find at least a drop of moisture, but they were dry as bone. I chewed leaves from dried branches, but they were bitter and only increased my thirst. I began hallucinating. It seemed to me that streams of pure water flowed somewhere nearby, that rain was beginning over the chasm, but the drops somehow didn't reach the bottom, that waterfalls poured from the cliffs, but I couldn't reach them. In such moments I bit my lips until they bled, trying to return to reality. Can't give in to visions, can't lose my mind. While I preserve sanity, there's hope. But hope for what? For a miracle? for divine intervention? Suddenly nearby appeared a small lizard, gray, with yellow eyes, the size of my finger. It sat on a stone and examined me with curiosity. "Hello, little one," I whispered. "Did you also end up here by accident? Or do you live here permanently?" Strangely, talking with the lizard eased my condition. Finally, some living creature in this kingdom of death. The lizard listened to my voice for a while, then quickly disappeared into a crack between stones. But its appearance gave me something. If a lizard lives here, then it's possible to survive here, at least for some time. But how did it get here? Lizards can't jump such heights. Was it also thrown here by someone? Or is there some other path? After some time, I can't say how much exactly. In this abyss, time lost all meaning. I saw something reddish. At first I thought it was another hallucination, born of thirst and pain. But the figure didn't disappear. It was a fox, small, reddish, with a fluffy tail. She sat by the opposite wall of the chasm and looked at me with intelligent yellow eyes. "Where did you come from, Redtail?" I whispered. The fox tilted her head as if listening to my voice. Then she carefully approached closer. She moved cautiously, ready to flee at the first sign of danger. I didn't move, trying not to frighten her. Perhaps she knows where there's water here. Animals always sense water better than people. The fox stopped about 5 paces from me. I could see how her ears moved, how her nose twitched. She was carefully studying me, deciding if I posed a threat. "Don't be afraid," I said quietly. "I wouldn't harm you even if I could." But how did she get here? Foxes can't fly. Was there really another path to this chasm? A path unknown to people? This thought struck me like lightning. If the fox is here, then she somehow got here. Perhaps somewhere there's a cave or tunnel. Perhaps somewhere there's an opening, too small for a person but sufficient for a fox. I started examining the walls more carefully. Most of the wall was indeed smooth and impregnable. But in one place, where dried bushes once grew, the rock was covered with reddish stains. Such stains are left by water flowing down stone. Water! Once there had been water here. A stream that flowed down the chasm wall. Where had it gone? Dried up after a drought? Changed direction after an earthquake? I felt these stains with my healthy left hand. They were dry, but their shape clearly showed that a stream had flowed here for a long time. And if water flows from above, it can flow inside the rock too. I began examining this place more carefully, and I saw that behind the dried bushes there was a dark spot. A shadow from stones? A depression in the rock? Or... My heart beat faster. This could be an opening. I looked back at the fox. She still sat in the same place and watched me. But now her gaze seemed to show something like approval, as if she knew what I was looking for and was glad I had finally found it. "You know about this opening, don't you?" I whispered. "You wanted to show me the way?" The fox rose and slowly approached the dark spot behind the bushes. She stood by it for a few seconds, then looked at me and disappeared into the darkness. Now I was certain. This was an exit, or at least a path somewhere from this stone grave. I hesitated for a long time. On one hand, the opening might lead to a dead end. I might get stuck there and die an even more horrible death. On the other hand, what awaited me if I stayed here? Slow death from thirst and hunger. The choice was obvious. Better to die trying to save yourself than simply wait for death. I crawled to the opening and tried to peer inside. The darkness was impenetrable, but I could feel a slight movement of air. So the opening led somewhere. It smelled of moisture weakly but perceptibly. Perhaps there really was water there. I pushed my head and shoulders into the opening and began slowly moving forward. My broken arm hurt wildly with every movement, but I gritted my teeth and continued. The passage was narrow, barely sufficient for a human body. The walls pressed from the sides. The ceiling almost touched my back. It was hard to breathe. The air was stagnant, with a taste of dampness. I moved, slowly, carefully, feeling the way, with my broken arm. One careless move and I could get stuck forever, or fall into some pit. The passage gradually widened. Soon I could move in a crouch, then stand at full height. The darkness was absolute. I had to orient myself only by touch and hearing. What darkness here, I thought. What if this really is a descent to Hades, and I, alive like Odysseus or Orpheus once, will find myself in the kingdom of the dead? But in Hades flow rivers, Acheron, Styx, Lethe, and I'll drink, finally drink. Gradually I began to notice weak light somewhere ahead. At first I thought it was another vision, born of fatigue and hope, but the light became brighter with each step. Light. Real light. Suddenly I heard a sound, quiet, barely audible, but unmistakably recognizable. The babbling of water. My heart beat so loudly it seemed audible even in this underground silence. Water. Real, living water. I quickened my pace, not paying attention to pain and danger. The sound became louder with each step. A few more turns of the narrow passage and I felt coldness under my feet. Water. A shallow stream flowed along the bottom of the underground tunnel. I fell to my knees and drank greedily. God, how sweet it was. Cold, clean, alive. Tastier than any nectar that, they say, the gods drink on Olympus. I drank long, feeling every cell of my body come alive. Strength returned with each swallow. My head cleared. The pain became less sharp. When I finally quenched my thirst, I sat on a stone and tried to understand where I was. The stream flowed further into the darkness. Where does it come from and where does it lead? Logic suggested. If there's a water flow, it must flow somewhere, perhaps to a river or lake. And where there's water, there must be life, and perhaps an exit to the surface. I went along the stream, following its sound in the darkness. Walking was difficult. The bottom was covered with slippery stones, and my broken arm interfered with keeping balance. But I walked. Now I had a goal, had hope. Where there's water, there's life, and where there's life, there may be salvation. The tunnel gradually expanded. The stream also became wider. Apparently other underground flows joined it. From time to time I stopped to drink and rest. Gradually I began to notice weak lighting somewhere ahead. At first I thought it was again a vision, born of fatigue. But the light became brighter with each step. Light. Real light. The last strength left me, and I ran, not paying attention to pain and danger. Light meant exit, meant return to the world of the living. The tunnel ended with an opening overgrown with bushes. Through the branches broke rays of sunlight, the most beautiful sight in my life. I pushed aside the branches with my healthy hand and stepped outside. The first thing that struck me after long stay underground was the brightness of light. Eyes accustomed to underground darkness squinted painfully from sunbeams. I had to wait several minutes for my vision to adjust. Then I looked around. I stood in a small wooded valley surrounded by low hills. The stream I had followed here widened and turned into a small river. Where was I? How far from Keadas? How much time had I spent underground? I looked at the Sunday. It was somewhere in the middle of the sky, so it was day. But what day? How long had I been unconscious at the bottom of the chasm? How many hours had I wandered the underground passages? I couldn't be sure. But it seemed only one day had passed since my fall into Keadas. Perhaps a little more. I sat by the stream and tried to organize my thoughts. I had been saved, by miracle, but saved from a place from which no one returns. But what to do next? First I needed to do something about my broken arm. It hung as a shapeless mass, and every movement brought unbearable pain. I found a long straight branch and tried to fashion it into a splint. This was extremely difficult to do with one hand, but somehow I managed. I tied my arm to my body with a piece of torn tunic. It became a little easier. Then I needed to decide where to go. Tugira was far, and the road lay through Spartan positions. In my condition, I couldn't fight even one enemy warrior. But I had no other options. My people had to know their commander was alive. I set off through the forest, trying to stay away from known roads. Spartan patrols could be everywhere, and meeting them in my condition meant certain death. I walked slowly, often stopping for rest. My arm hurt, my head spun from fatigue, and consequences of the injury. But I walked, supported by one thought about my duties to the living. How much time had passed since my disappearance? What was happening on Gira? Were my people holding the defense? Had they surrendered to the Spartans, losing hope for my return? Along the way I pondered how to change war tactics. The experience with Damocles showed that Spartans could act not only with force but also with cunning. So we too needed to become more cunning. I remembered Androcles' words that a warrior must be not only a lion but also a fox. Now I understood them in a new way. The fox had saved my life not only by showing the way from Keadas but also by giving me a lesson in wisdom. Sometimes cunning is more important than strength. When it grew dark, I could already see familiar lights in the distance. My heart beat faster. Gira! My impregnable fortress was still holding. I approached the fortress carefully, following all rules of conspiracy. There could be Spartan patrols, there could be an ambush. When I reached the secret passage on the western slope, I heard familiar voices. Pancratus was talking with younger commanders. Aristomenes has been gone for 2 days now. Perhaps the Spartans are torturing him, trying to learn our plans. What if they killed him? Someone's young voice asked. Then we must prepare for the final battle. Without our commander, we won't last long. I felt both joyful and sad. Joyful because people hadn't lost faith and hadn't surrendered. Sad because they were preparing for death. Not knowing about my rescue, I stepped out from behind a rock and quietly gave the password. Messenia is free. The sentry turned sharply and stared with his mouth open. Aristomenes? Gods be merciful. Is it really you? It's me, Nicander. Alive and well. Well. Almost well. In a minute a crowd of warriors gathered around me. Someone wept with joy. Someone laughed. Someone brought water and food. Everyone wanted to hear what had happened. We sat in a circle by the great fire in the center of the fortress. I told them everything about Damocles' betrayal, about the ambush, about the death of our comrades, about Keadas, about the fox that saved my life. They listened, without interrupting. When I finished, they were silent for a long time. Finally Pancratus said, "The gods sent you that fox. It means our cause is not yet lost." "Perhaps," I replied. "But we must rely not only on gods but also on our own cunning. We fought like lions openly and bravely. Now we'll fight like foxes wisely and cunningly." I explained my new plan to them. The end of great battles. The end of open assaults. Now our war would be like hunting. Divide forces into small units, each acting independently. Attack where we're not expected. Strike quickly and disappear before the enemy could recover. "We're weaker than Spartans in open battle," I explained. "But in guerrilla war we can be stronger. We know every path in our mountains, every cave. We'll use this." Over the following weeks we prepared for new warfare. Divided people into squads of 15 to 20 men. Each squad received its own area of operations and specific tasks. Some were to attack Spartan camps, others to set ambushes on roads, still others to destroy weapon and supply depots. I personally led a squad specializing in eliminating high-ranking Spartan commanders. Among our targets was that same Eurytus who had thrown me into Keadas. My arm gradually healed, though it never became what it was before. But I learned to fight with my left hand. And this even had advantages. Opponents didn't expect attacks from the unusual side. The first success came in a month. Pancratus' squad captured a large Spartan camp and took prisoner several dozen enemy warriors. Aristomenes' squad destroyed a weapons depot near Sthenocleros Ford, and my squad set an ambush on a mountain road and defeated a Spartan unit along with its commander. Among the dead was the younger escort Lysander, the one who had wanted to give me water. I felt no pity for him. In war there's no place for sentiment. I found Eurytus 2 months later. He commanded a unit guarding one of the Spartan depots. We watched him for a week, studying his habits. We attacked in the morning when the sentries were tired after night duty. The battle was short and fierce. The Spartans fought bravely, but we caught them by surprise. Eurytus was the last to lay down arms. When he saw me, horror appeared in his eyes. You were supposed to die in Keadas," I was supposed to, but didn't, I replied calmly. The gods decided otherwise. He tried to grab his sword, but my men had already disarmed him. I could have killed him on the spot. Victor's right, but I remember the fox's lesson about cunning. You will live, I said, until your comrade said Aristomenes has returned. That the one you threw into the abyss of death is fighting against you again. The fear in his eyes was better reward than his death. News of my return from Keadas quickly spread throughout Messenia. People said the gods had saved me, that I had their special protection. This gave enormous moral effect. New people began coming to us. Helots who escaped from Spartan masters, peasants from remote valleys, even some young Spartans who were tired of their system's cruelty. But most important, our war tactics changed. Great battles became things of the past. Now we fought like foxes, cunningly, unexpectedly, always where the enemy didn't expect us. The Spartans didn't know where to expect attack. Their patrols were constantly on alert. Commanders were afraid to leave camps without large escorts, and we appeared where they didn't expect us and disappeared before the enemy could organize pursuit. Guerrilla war continued for years. The Spartans never managed to completely subdue Messenia during my lifetime. They controlled major roads and main population centers, but the mountains remained ours. We created an entire underground state with its own administration, courts, even schools for children. Young people who grew up in our camps became the basis of a new generation of fighters. I often thought about that fox that saved my life. She became a symbol of new tactics. Cunning, agility, ability to find a way out where it seemed there wasn't one. Sparta never became completely victorious during my lifetime, but they couldn't break our spirit either. And that means the struggle isn't over. Someday, perhaps in many years, someone from our descendants will finish what we began, and in that distant victory will be a particle of the miracle that happened to me in the abyss of Keadas, a particle of wisdom from a small red-tailed fox who showed that even from the deepest abyss there's a path to light.